Oh, AI. It really is a fascinating moment to be alive, isn't it? We spent the last few years being told that generative tools would make our professional and personal lives easier. Yet, as we move through 2026, for many of us at least, the reality feels a lot more exhausting than we anticipated. And it turns out there's a specific neurobiological reason why your streamlined workflow might be leaving you more drained than your old one. But we'll get to that. I'm Dr. Jess Payne, a neuroscience and psychology professor at the University of Notre Dame, where I direct the Sleep, Stress, and Cognition Lab, and co-founder of the Brain-Based Leader. I'm also an AI enthusiast who nevertheless has a lot of concerns about it. So in this video, I thought we'd look at the research on how AI is affecting our brains for the better and for the worse, because the data coming out right now are both fascinating and even a little bit hopeful, but also they're honestly kind of concerning. When you look at the data as it currently stands, there really does seem to be a paradox. Recent research from Harvard and Boston Consulting Group found truly remarkable productivity gains when consultants used AI. But then Microsoft's 2025 Work Trend Index, which covered 31,000 full-time workers across markets, reported that 80% of the global workforce says that they lack the time or energy to do their work. Gallup's State of the Global Workplace 2025 reported that 40% of global employees experienced stress a lot of the previous day, and in the United States and Canada, that figure jumped to 50%. Microsoft also reported that 48% of employees and 52% of leaders say that work feels chaotic and fragmented. So AI may be making some tasks faster, but a lot of people aren't feeling the benefit, and many are showing signs of increased stress and cognitive strain. So, is AI helping us work faster and better? Or is it mostly wearing us out, scaring us about our job security? Or, I don't know, its potential for taking over the planet and dominating humanity? Or is it just all too confidently leading us down these rabbit holes of made-up quotes, incorrect data, false insights, and completely wrong conclusions? So let's ask what's actually happening in your brain when you use AI, successfully or not. And let's see if we can resolve the paradox by breaking down some of the research on how AI is affecting our brains before I try to turn that into some practical takeaways that I think will help you use AI in a brain-smart manner. Before we get into what's causing the neural strain and the exhaustion so many people are feeling, I want to start with the benefits of AI, because some of the early evidence really does make me hopeful. And it's based on some pretty rigorous research. Going back to that work with Boston Consulting Group, the researchers tested GPT-4's impact on over 750 consultants doing actual consulting work. And that's important. They weren't doing lab-based problems, but realistic, complex tasks like developing new product concepts and analyzing brand performance, things they'd really do at work, that they really were doing at work. And the results were pretty impressive. Consultants using AI not only completed more tasks and finished them faster, but they also produced work that was rated 40% higher in quality by independent reviewers. And that held across different experience levels. Both junior and senior consultants saw substantial gains. But, and this is important, it may be because these consultants were using AI to build on expertise they already had. We'll dig into that idea in a few minutes because it's important. Also, it isn't just about speed and quality. Another study, this one published in the journal Science Advances, found that AI genuinely enhances individual creativity on divergent thinking tasks. People using AI generated more ideas, more novel ideas, and with greater flexibility and elaboration when solving open-ended problems. So the cognitive science here makes a lot of sense to me. When AI handles that extraneous cognitive load, the unnecessary mental work of searching for information, reformatting documents, pulling together sources, it frees your executive systems and your working memory in those executive networks for higher level thinking. AI acts as a capability multiplier in these instances, and really not just some kind of efficiency tool. So this early research suggests benefits of AI are really there and that they're substantial and measurable. The productivity gains do seem to be real, which is great, right? But that brings us back to that central question. If AI is working this well, why are we seeing an over 40% increase in cognitive strain? Why is it leaving us so exhausted? Let's talk about a study in Harvard Business Review because I think it helps answer this question. Researchers in this study followed roughly 200 employees at a US tech company for 8 months after they adopted AI tools. While they found efficiency gains, they also found that these gains didn't translate into saved time or less work. Instead, they found that AI adoption led to more work and created what the researchers called a self-reinforcing cycle of intensification. That happened through 3 specific mechanisms that I think a lot of you will recognize. First, there was task expansion. Because AI lowered the barrier to complex work, people's roles started blurring. Project managers began writing code. Researchers took on engineering tasks. Employees absorbed work that would have previously justified the hiring of additional people. The time AI freed up didn't go back to the employee. It just got filled with more labor. So there was no time for rest. It actually added to the workday. It didn't shrink it. Secondly, the boundaries of the workday seemed to shrink. In fact, they dissolved. Because starting a new task became as easy as just typing in a prompt, work became what the researchers called ambient, meaning people would send one last prompt before leaving their desks, or use the ease of AI to justify working through lunch, during meetings even, which means they were distracted, and through breaks. These tiny little micro breaks that people take throughout the day also help consolidate memories, so that the neurons of the frontal cortex and other medial temporal regions of the brain don't become saturated, and they can reset after each break. They clean the cache, if you will, so you can now input and take in new information. Without those breaks, we become exhausted because our frontal networks end up getting completely saturated. So those natural pauses that used to exist in the workday, the ones the brain really needs, they just disappeared. And third, instead of doing one thing faster, employees started managing multiple AI-driven work streams simultaneously. So running parallel agents, juggling more projects all at once. In the short term, they felt more productive, but the researchers observed increasing cognitive fatigue and higher burnout risk over the course of the study. And that makes a lot of sense. The authors point out that when AI makes a task faster, those productivity gains are almost never given back to the employee in the form of rest or recovery time, or even these little micro breaks. Instead, that increased speed becomes the new normal, and expectations then ratchet up accordingly. It's a pattern I keep seeing play out with the leaders I work with. There's this initial excitement that they report, masking the accumulating cognitive costs until their people hit a wall. So now let me explain what's happening neurologically that makes this so mentally depleting. A groundbreaking 2025 study from MIT Media Lab measured brain activity using EEG while people wrote essays under 3 conditions: using ChatGPT, using just Google search, or using only their brain. And the findings were really pretty remarkable. People using ChatGPT showed significantly weaker brain connectivity. Specifically, their alpha and theta brain waves, which are associated with memory processing and integration, were much less active. When those same people later tried to recall what they'd written, they remembered almost nothing. That's a problem. The task got done efficiently even, but the brain never really engaged. It never really locked in or stored information about the material. You end up with output, but without the lasting cognitive scaffolding or architecture that normally comes from doing the work. So again, there's a failure of this memory processing and memory consolidation that allows you to deeply embed what you're learning into neural networks so that you can use it again later. Instead, the use of AI is shortchanging those circuits that usually allow you to learn and engage with the material in a way that's satisfactory. So this may also be contributing to people's experience of this sort of fuzzy exhaustion that goes along so often with the use of AI tools. In another recent study, researchers gave 92 radiologists a big set of data, a big set of mammograms to read, and alongside each case, they displayed an AI suggestion. When the AI suggestion was correct, radiologists were accurate 78% of the time. But when the AI suggestion was incorrect, their accuracy rate dropped to 28%. That's a really enormous swing, and it happens because the AI's suggestion acts like an anchor. The researchers then actually tried to fix this. They gave some radiologists richer explanations, things like heat maps and additional supporting information. They also tried priming some radiologists to just be more skeptical of AI before they even read the cases. None of it reliably undid the influence of the AI suggestion. The suggestion just kept biasing the radiologist's decisions. This is called anchoring, and it's one of the most well-documented patterns in cognitive science. Once a number or an answer is placed in front of you, your brain treats it as a starting point, as a sort of anchor, and not one option amongst many. And that's why more information doesn't necessarily solve the problem. There's a concept circulating out there in the research literature that I think might help explain this paradox of why AI can be so great in some cases but frustrating in others. It's called the Jagged technological frontier. And here's what it means. Some tasks fall very easily within AI's capabilities, like formatting and then having to reformat a reference section of a paper in my field, or maybe summarizing a document, pulling together research from multiple sources. AI handles all of that really quite brilliantly, and usually quite reliably. But then other tasks that seem like they'd be equally straightforward, like evaluating whether a particular strategy will work in your specific organizational context, or determining which of 3 recommendations fits your company's culture, or even synthesizing the latest research on a topic that you're just personally interested in, are beyond what AI can do reliably, at least at this point. So the frontier between what AI can and can't do isn't a smooth line. It's a jagged, irregular, and most importantly, a non-obvious line. You can't look at a task and immediately know which side of that line it's going to fall on. And this is a place where your brain starts to pay a tax, and your frontal executive networks begin to get saturated. When you're working with AI, you're never fully delegating. Even when AI produces exactly what you asked for, you can't just accept it and move on. Again, your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that's essential for working memory, that's responsible for judgment, for evaluation, and any kind of strategic thinking, it has to stay active in what I call this persistent verification mode. You're constantly asking, is this accurate? Does this make sense? Does it make sense in this context? Is this the right tone? Wait, would this actually work? Did the AI just hallucinate something important? This is fundamentally different from how you use a calculator and how your brain responds when you do. When a calculator tells you that 127 times 43 equals 5,461, you don't have to verify that math. You can trust it and move on. But when ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude gives you a strategic recommendation or even drafts an email for you, you have to evaluate every sentence. Your brain can never fully offload the cognitive work because it can't fully trust the output. And here is what I think makes that particularly taxing. You often don't even know you're on the wrong side of that frontier until you're deep in the work. Say you ask AI to analyze a complex data set, and you get what looks like a really reasonable, thorough response. It's only later do you realize that it missed a critical nuance, or it made an assumption that it didn't tell you about that doesn't even apply to your situation. So you're not just evaluating the output, you're staying vigilant throughout the entire process. That feeling of being drained is literally what's happening, because your prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain that demands the most energy in the form of oxygen and glucose, and you've just blown a lot of it on what might not even be a final product, at least not one that you trust enough to use. But there's another layer to this exhaustion, and I kind of want to acknowledge it because I think a lot of us are feeling it, even if we haven't really articulated it very well yet. It's like a low-grade anxiety, a sense that something significant is shifting, even though daily life for most of us still looks mostly the same. Maybe the feeling is more explicit, and it's more like this anxious, stomach-clenching feeling that the world's changing fast, and that you'll need to struggle very hard to keep up. It seems like barely a day passes without some new viral warning that something big is happening, and most people aren't ready, or that you have only 18 months before your skill set is obsolete. All of this implies that if you mess this up, you'll be permanently left behind, with catastrophic results for your life. The brain really struggles with these ambiguous threats to our sense of safety, and it especially struggles with uncertainty, even though I'd argue that uncertainty is the fundamental state of our existence. Your brain is very good at responding to concrete and immediate threats, like a snake in your path, or a car that's swerved and is about to hit you. Your amygdala is going to fire off, your body will mobilize, and you act. But your brain is remarkably bad at processing threats that are ambiguous and abstract and probabilistic. There's a paper that used fMRI to examine what happens in the brain during uncertainty. What they found was that intolerance of uncertainty was positively correlated with amygdala activity, which is your brain's threat detection center, but negatively correlated with activity in a region of the prefrontal cortex involved in cognitive coping. In other words, when the threat is amorphous and ambiguous, your alarm system activates, but your problem-solving resources can't fully come online. So that's exhausting in a different way. It's this background hum of knowing that something's changing faster than you can track and that it might affect you in negative ways. The anxiety you might be feeling is not irrational at all. That's your brain doing exactly what it's supposed to do in these type of circumstances. It's picking up on real signals of rapid change, and it's warning you, even if you can't organize those signals into any kind of clear picture of what the threat even is. This kind of ambient anxiety becomes much, much more manageable when you move from this passive observation to active engagement. It kind of tamps down the threat response. So perhaps ironically, if you find yourself feeling this way, like really anxious, it's likely a good idea to engage with AI more, not less. When people experience behavioral control, like they take action rather than passively just waiting, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which is yet another part of this massive frontal lobe, becomes activated, which then inhibits the stress-reactive structures in the brainstem and the limbic system, like the amygdala. More importantly, when you engage the frontal lobe and you suppress the amygdala, it creates plasticity in the brain. You change it. The more familiar you become with a stressor, the more your brain recruits that same prefrontal circuitry each time you're faced with it. Okay, so given all of this, what should you do? Well, I'm not going to tell you to stop using AI. That's neither realistic nor is it advisable, because first and foremost, there are genuine benefits to using AI, at least when it's used thoughtfully. And even if you really are afraid that AI might take your job, the best thing that you can do is become more familiar with AI rather than avoiding it. But we need to be much more strategic about how to integrate AI into our lives, keeping the human brain in mind. And this goes for people who are just casual users of AI, who want to figure out how to use AI to improve their lives. And it's also relevant for leaders who are trying to integrate AI into the workplace. So the first principle, recognize that AI use has a cognitive cost and budget for it. Budget for it accordingly. If you're using AI heavily for certain tasks, try to reduce your commitments elsewhere to compensate for the increased decision-making load. Stop adding AI on top of a full plate and expecting to feel less tired. Second, never use AI as a cognitive endpoint. This is a critical distinction between augmentation, using AI to augment human thinking, and trying to replace it. If AI gives you a final answer, your brain disengages. If AI gives you a starting point, your brain will stay engaged and active. So instead of asking AI for solutions, use it to generate comparisons and hypotheses. Push it, ask it where it's wrong, ask for competing models, ask for trade-off analyses, ask for structured disagreements, have it argue against itself. This keeps your executive networks engaged in the evaluation and integration work where strategic thinking really happens. The third thing, protect thinking time. This is so essential. Protect it and protect it at all costs. Thinking is cognitively demanding work that requires sustained attention. It often feels inefficient, but it's exactly what builds and maintains cognitive capacity and changes in the cognitive architecture in the form of plasticity that lead to true lasting benefits. You need protected cognitive training zones in your schedule, the same way athletes need physical training zones. This means, for instance, blocks of time for long-form strategic thinking, scenario planning without AI, ideally do it by hand, deep reading and synthesis, reflective writing will help you use AI more as an augmentation and a tool than a replacement for the thinking that you need to do. The fourth thing, and this is really important, is to build in genuine recovery time. Your prefrontal cortex is the most energy-demanding part of your brain. So your frontal lobe needs periods of structured rest, like periods of low cognitive demand to replenish those metabolic resources we talked about. And this means taking real breaks, not checking your phone, which is cognitively demanding, genuine downtime. This might be a 10-minute walk outside, or just a brief break where you close your eyes and let your mind wander for a minute. Or really just stepping away from your screens entirely. These breaks we've been talking about can significantly restore executive function and capacity. And finally, take your sleep seriously. When you're spending days in constant evaluation mode, making rapid-fire decisions, your brain needs more recovery during sleep, not less. Sleep is when your brain consolidates new information, new things you've learned. It clears out metabolic waste. It restores this prefrontal cortical function that's so important for your role as a human being at work, or just a human being more generally. The research on sleep and cognitive performance is very, very clear. Sleep quality matters enormously for executive function, and cognitively demanding work creates even greater need for sleep. Whew, okay, I know that was a lot, but here's what I want you to take away from all of this. The exhaustion you're feeling from working with AI, if that's you, or the fear you're feeling because you can't possibly know what the outcomes of AI being unleashed on society will be, are completely normal experiences. They're completely normal for a brain that's under increased strain and increased uncertainty. Remember, the brain is a resource hog, and you can saturate these circuits, especially in the frontal lobe, that you rely on for your best work or your best performance. You just can't productivity hack your way around human biology. Your prefrontal cortex has very real limits. It's capacity controlled. Your capacity for sustained decision-making has real limits. And the solution isn't pushing through exhaustion. It's so much better to design work in ways that respect how your brain functions, guided by real neuroscientific principles. So what are you feeling? What are you noticing? Have you found strategies that help? If you have, drop a comment below. And if you want more neuroscience-backed insights on optimizing your performance, on wellness, on living your best life, if you want more content on how this applies to leadership, please subscribe to this channel. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.